All right, so today is the 30th of November, and we are in the auditorium basement, and we're holding a sidewalk workshop. So there are several individuals who are here from City Council, from Planning, from HDC. We've got the mayor here. We've got our clerk here, Ida. So this is an initial workshop. Just to kind of give you a little bit of background, Tom Buford, who is on Planning, had mentioned some items that sounded important to us enough that we would request a workshop. Steve Holyfield, of course, has brought this to City Council, and we are where we're at today as far as having a workshop scheduled for sidewalks. I actually put together a little, just kind of a quick sheet so that we had something to go from. It is not perfect, and it is not necessarily what we have to follow. It's just I think that we needed something to start with. So the goal of this initial sidewalk workshop is to determine the current condition of Eureka Springs sidewalks and what we would like our sidewalk system to look like long term. So we know it's not going to happen overnight. We know whatever is done isn't going to be perfect in the next year. This is a long-term process to get our sidewalks where they need to be. Yesterday, Main Street had a walk that many of us went on, and we walked, I don't know, how far would you say? A couple, 2-3 miles? I would say 2-3 miles, and we saw lots of different types of sidewalks. We saw places where there weren't any sidewalks, which are within neighborhoods. We saw, I would say, at least 4 or 5 different types of sidewalks, some in good condition and some in really, really bad condition. We even saw one sidewalk that had a tree that had been cut down, and the stump is still in the tree or in the sidewalk and has now started to decay. So it's a hazard down on Main Street for that to be like that as of right now. So there are lots of things, little and big, that could be done with our sidewalk system. It's just a matter of, do we, I hate to say that this is the group that has to decide, but do we as a community feel like our sidewalks are important enough to have a workshop and to take that further? So a couple things on this list that I did. How do we increase walking and bike rates? So biking's big, walking is big. How do we create comfortable, connected pedestrian neighborhoods? So how do we get some of those neighborhoods to be completely connected? Some don't have sidewalks, some do have sidewalks. Some areas have sidewalks and others don't. Some sides of streets have it, some other sides of the street don't have it. How can we create pedestrian safety, not only for all ages, but also on our ADA side? How do we build a sidewalk system in Eureka Springs that is safe and equitable long term? So I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Steve, because he is the one from City Council that actually put this on our agenda. And maybe, I don't know if any of these discussion items make sense to you, but do you want to go ahead and take it from here and kind of start the conversation of what we currently have?
Yeah, the walk yesterday was really informative. It's amazing the different types of sidewalks we have, the different conditions we have sidewalks. There's lots of places with no sidewalks. And, just from our town's point of view, and I've lived here 11 years, it's one of the feedbacks some people give us who drive a cab in town says one of the biggest complaints from tourism is our sidewalks are so bad. They're almost non-walkable. And we're putting a lot of money into trails, bike trails, and stuff like that. It's great, but we can't even, when you have a town, you can't even walk around downtown. It's like, what are we doing here? And also, I've been looking at the disabilities, attracting tourism with the groups like LGBTQ community, and also with tourists with disabilities. And, I know we can't do anything about how steep and hilly and all that stuff our town is, but we can do something about ability for people to use those wheelchairs or mobile chairs or something like that. Or even, as Autumn pointed out in one of our meetings, young mothers or dads with strollers and stuff getting around town. It's a nightmare. And I don't see it getting any better. In 11 years I've lived here, it's not gotten any better. So I wanted to at least have a conversation about what are we doing, what can we do, can we at least make a long-term plan. To me, a little bit is better than none at all. Just to say, well, we can't do anything, to throw our arms up in the air as things, because this is not just staying the way it is, it's getting worse and worse, as we go. And I know I'm surprised that people haven't been sued more about people falling and getting hurt in our town. I know I was downtown about a month ago, and a young man, looked like he's in his early 40s, fell and busted his nose right on the sidewalk, bleeding everywhere. And he was very embarrassed, but I was very embarrassed for this town to say, he tripped over a piece of sidewalk sticking up, just like it is all over town. So I'd like to start that, just having the conversation and saying, what can we do about this? Can we at least talk about what our alternatives are for some long-term plan? So I don't know how we want to go from this point on. Does anybody just want to step up and speak, or?
Well, I know that just on here, the current ordinance, I guess it really starts there. There's an ordinance on the books. You all have a copy of it right now. And the question is, do you think, the question really is this ordinance working? So is it working? If it's not working, then why isn't it working? And the decision really is this acceptable for the next 15 to 20 years? Or isn't it? There are if you read the ordinance, you'll see within that it is up to the property owner to repair sidewalks. So we've got some options for them. We've got different types of sidewalk aggregate that they can use or style that they can put in. But going back to what Tom originally talked about at our planning meeting, was that there seems to be, or his understanding of a couple cities, were that there are some grants out there that are available to cities to repair sidewalks and do sidewalks. But it wouldn't necessarily benefit a private sidewalk owner. So it would have to be on a bigger scale as far as a city applying for something like that. So, Tom, do you want to explain maybe a little bit about what you had found?
Yes. When I kind of started the conversation, I know there's some people on city council now that weren't on city council when we first started talking about sidewalks several years back. And 4 or 5 years ago, we actually did, the mayor was able to get, I think, $25,000 a year in the budget for sidewalk repairs. And the theory was, under the existing ordinance, if the owner didn't repair the sidewalks, the city would come in, have the work done, put a lien on the property, and of course the lien may sit there for years until they refinance or sold the property. But the theory was, once that happened, the money would be paid back and go back in that reserve fund. And I think we had it in the budget for a couple of years, and it never was utilized, and I don't think it's been in the budget the last couple of years. But there are, I've been told that we can't get grants for sidewalks under the Community Development Block Grant because our incomes are higher. But if the city took the sidewalks back, there are private nonprofits that make donations to cities that have such thing as sidewalks or parks or whatever. So we might be able to put some money, if we're not under the Community Development Block Grant money, from a private foundation. And of course there is legislation that's been passed by Congress that gives more money to cities on these different plans. And I don't know whether all the American Rescue Plan or the BBB plan or whatever, but there is money going to be out there in some form or fashion. And but if the sidewalks are required to be maintained by the owner, we're not going to be eligible for those monies.
Right.
And that's one way. Or we can go back, like you're saying, look at the existing ordinance. And I believe the building inspector has made some comments that the existing ordinance, the time frames are long. I think you have 180 days to notify them, and then you've got another 90 days, then you go to court, and it drags the process out. So we can either look at the existing ordinance and try to tighten it up and see if we want to keep pursuing the existing ordinance, so we can look at the flip side about going ahead and taking the sidewalks back from the property owner and putting them back on the city and try to pursue some grant money that way. And but I just wanted to start the kind of conversation going, rather than just not doing anything, at least start talking about it.
And I think, if I'm correct, there are certain guidelines. Is the ordinance for the entire town, or does it differentiate between the historical zone and subdivision? It does, doesn't it? Okay, I thought that's how it read. So if we're able to do that on the existing one, it seems that we should be able to do that on a revised one. Meaning, if we said, if city council decided they wanted to pursue this in updating an ordinance, they could say, we're going to update our ordinance and say that we've got maybe zones. We've got historic district, we've got zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, and whatever is in that zone, they could say it's either the property owner or it's the city's responsibility. And therefore, then some of those grants and things could be applied for. The question is, what is out there? I know I've seen some for even AARP that they've given to cities, because I know I talked to Jackie about this yesterday, about walking towns, walking cities. How do we create spaces that are more walkable? Well, to be a walking neighborhood, you have to have some sidewalks, right? Because we don't have, our streets are narrow enough, we have enough cars going up and down, then we don't want people walking in the streets. So the alternative is to have good sidewalks. There are grants out there, and there are organizations out there that do provide funding for cities. It's an application process, and even at this point, if we applied for anything, we wouldn't see anything probably for a year and a half.
I don't know, should we back up a step and say, what is the current ordinance? Is it working or is it not working?
Well, that's what I asked, yeah.
Mr. Holyfield, this is Ferguson Stewart Planning. My experience we've seen some sidewalks improvement. I've seen new areas that have had repairs done, and they've maintained those repairs. But I've seen other areas that have nothing done. I've got pictures dating back 2 years ago that those same issues are still there today. So I think the ordinance is workable. It's got functionality. The problem, I think, again, and I think it's about the scale. The scale is huge. We've got a lot of area, and I agree with the zoning idea of somehow breaking it down into an area so that it can be managed. We've already, I'll be talking to, Jacob here, but I know that there's a lot of legwork. I walk downtown a lot. I see a lot of businesses, and that's one of the people first they bring up is the sidewalks. Can you do something with sidewalks? Well, some places are way too narrow. It gets clogged up with people. So we've got it's not just the surface area, it's the area. And so, you got the dynamics that we really can't change. You've got a 30-degree incline that it's part of nature. We're on a mountainside, right? So, but there are areas here that have seen improvements. Like I said, I've seen new sidewalks with the new aggregate material. So I think that was done about 2 years ago, I think. The new aggregate material reduced the cost to a property owner. But what I'm not sure of is, and I don't know because it's part of the executive, is that what property owners have already been on the warning track? Which property owners are already waiting for that timeline to go through? I don't know. It's not like, do we put a flag out there on the sidewalk and say they're in violation? I don't know. That's the only thing I don't know, is what's currently in progress and what's the plan, I guess, does the city currently have a plan? And so that's where I'm at. But I've seen some improvements, so something's working. So
I love the idea of having the zoning, and I love the idea of the zoning working with the city. I also think that we need to be concerned about mixing the mediums. There's several different ways you can improve the sidewalk, but it doesn't say anything about joining, if you've got concrete and then you've got limestone, it just doesn't, it looks so mismatched. So I love the idea of the zoning. I also think that, or I'm just curious if the grant programs, if we do, is the city have to be sole responsibility for those, or can it be like a rebate program or something, or in certain zones you get 25% help or a certain percentage of help from the city, or do these grant programs require the city to be solely responsible?
They're probably all different.
Right.
I mean, I would assume. Butch, can you comment on that?
I'm still trying to wrap my head around which grant y'all are talking about, because I haven't been able to find it.
But how
The
does it?
CDBG money, which is the only money that I'm aware of that the city's eligible for, we're not eligible for because of our income, as Tom mentioned. We have we get grant money from back to school grants from the highway department. That's what we've been doing up on the highways.
Is that the
in
TAP?
62. That's your TAP grants.
Yep.
That's the only monies that we've found from the state that we're eligible for. I've never heard anything from the AARP, and I doubt seriously if they got any money to give to cities, because otherwise I think every city in the United States would be applying for them. And they're not a wealthy foundation to begin with. So I don't know. I mean, if anybody knows those places, I'd be glad to look at them. Most of the time, and again, if the city gets involved, it's an expensive proposition. And when we're remodeling in our ordinance, we do consider what the sidewalks are abutting next to.
Okay.
And again, that got expensive too. And I think at one time, if it abuts next to limestone, it was supposed to be limestone. And then they changed it into going into stamped concrete, which isn't quite as expensive, or aggregates. And then you go back into, as Fergie was talking about, the widths. Some of the widths you're not going to be able to change because you got a retaining wall on one side and you got the street curb on the other
Right,
side.
right.
So we're limited on there. Some of the, again, places that, we don't have sidewalks. I can think of several that we don't have. We have them on one side and don't have them on the other. But again, the cost of a sidewalk depends on where you're at. If you've got a retaining wall, if you've got anything that's over 32 inches, you're going to have a retaining wall and handrails. And then you're looking at similar to what we have up there on 62 right now.
Right. And-
Several
and-
$100 per square foot.
Yeah, and like downtown on Spring Street there, those sidewalks aren't on bedrock. They're hovering above ground. So there's a engineering challenge there. And I know it's not the discussion, but I'd love to talk about removing that culvert. But yeah, the reality is that, and there's stones, I know right in front of Basin Park that I just day before yesterday wobbled on. And I'm thinking, woo, that was unusual. So that's one of the things. So it's not, let's go get a company, just stamp out sidewalks, because there's some challenges there that are in the downtown historic tourist area that are a challenge to start with, just because of how they're deployed. They're deployed 20 feet above bedrock. So there's a fall there, and they've got to be pedestals, I guess. They're placed on pedestals. I don't know the engineering of it, but I'm assuming that there's some challenges there to place those sidewalks above ground like that. So that's got to be a cost factor right there with an engineering company.
Was anybody here, or was anyone on city council in 2010 when this ordinance was updated and changed? Does anybody remember why it went from city to property owner? Was it solely based on cost, or was there another
I think
reason?
it was pretty much cost. I don't remember the exact reason on that. Terry, you have any?
I don't remember. I don't remember if I was even on there then. I'm sure I was here at the last meeting, that I'm sure. But
I don't remember either, that was 2010.
you know, that's the thing, and what we've done with this ordinance, when this was done in 2010, whether I was a part of it or not, I don't remember. But I just don't think we're taking the right approach. Personally, I think we're expecting too much of the property owners. I think back somewhere in the history of the town, the city fathers, whoever they were at that particular time, and it goes back a long ways, because it's been that the property owner's been responsible since I've been here, and that was early 70s when our family got here, and that was already like that. So, you know, I think the city at some time in the history of things pushed the responsibility over on the property owners because they just didn't want to do it. They had the highway department, had Highway 23, or 23B, which was, or 62B, that went through town. And although they were curb to curb, they still had some responsibility for sidewalks. And that street, in RNA survey, the streets are all owned by the city,
Downtown?
all over. In the
Oh,
whole-
okay.
in the whole-
With the exception of 23 and 62. That's state.
Okay.
Yeah, those are state right of way. But the city owns the street right of way, not the property owner. Later on, when the subdivisions came, I think Clayton's the same way, and Magnetic is not. I think Magnetic is one of the early ones that went to the center of the street. I can't remember, but I'd have to check that, but I think that's right.
So
And
you're,
then all the ones after that were all where you deed to the center of the street and you just have an easement. All the
The-
streets are easements, right?
from the curb in?
Yeah, well, yeah, or whatever it should be, you know, but they were never, in traditionally what they've done you know, for many, many years in most places, a subdivision, when it's put in, they install the sidewalks as well,
Right. The builder,
the building.
Yeah.
And then those are covered by an HOA.
right.
That's, you know, typically, or in many instances, they were put in, and just like the street, then they were given to the city, and the city became responsible.
If they were built and designed according to the street specifications.
Yeah, they had to be, you know, they had to be done accordingly, but, you know, I mean, we don't have that kind of, I don't know how things were historically here. I don't know when that was done or why it was done. I'm sure it was done to save the city money. And just, you know, we'll just push it off on the property owners. And I think that's what this, you know, they did intend, was just continue that same thing. And I think we need a fresh look at the whole package. I
Well,
really do.
One of the items I did put in here was, if you look at, you know, are we missing out on grants? Obviously, we don't really know. I know, I'm not saying that you're wrong, Butch. I'm just saying that, you know, I don't believe there's ever been a group that has really gone out and looked and said, who is it that you, who is it that,
Research.
researches our grant? Wasn't there a group out, was it out of Little Rock or is it out of
We have
Fayette?
several different people doing grants.
Okay, so, do they generally, pick up on items that are presented within a city council planning or HDC meeting? Or are they being tasked with a list that's been given by City
I
Hall?
can ask, the Northwest Arkansas Economic Development District does a lot of our grants, and I just ask them, are you aware of any grants available?
Okay, so does that, I guess what I'm asking is, are you the one, or is City Hall the entity that presents them with, this is what we're looking for?
The mayor's the one, as the CEO of
Okay.
the city, that discusses this And I also sit on the board, so.
Okay, and then do you present to them every year a list of these are some of the projects we're looking at? Or do you rely on them?
We have a long list of projects that we give them and say, are we eligible for any of these monies, any grants available? We've been doing that for everything from Black Bass Dam to water and sewer, sidewalks.
Okay, so it's
fire
a
trucks.
running list. You don't present it every year and,
No,
Sidewalks is on that list.
yeah. I
Well, they
mean,
can't-
we just constantly
Well,
ask.
they can't give a grant to the property owners, can they, Butch? I mean,
Beg your pardon?
if you can't get a grant to go to the homeowner, can you, on the sidewalk in Starkville District, because,
I don't know, I mean, some homeowners can get preservation grants.
but I mean, as a district as a whole, I mean, you can't present,
They
say,
have
we
to apply
want
for them individually.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
That's
Well, you'd
not
have
gonna
to
happen.
anyway, yeah.
That's not gonna happen.
right.
And, I don't know, what are we looking at, 20 million, 50 million for sidewalks?
It's a lot.
I don't know.
mean, it depends on
we don't
what
know.
you do, but.
Well, I mean, if you're going to take the bite of the apple,
well,
Yeah, but it's a long-term bite.
oh, absolutely.
So-
Well, but you put your grant out there.
No, I
and then-
understand.
And then you whittle it down, say,
Right.
oh, well, we're not going to give you the 50 million, but we can give you, and that's what we've been doing with Black Bass Dam for
Right.
years. And we finally got a grant for it through the feds. But again, it's part of the infrastructure.
Yeah. Again, there's two things we're looking at. Do we think that the current ordinance is working? Is it working? Isn't it
No.
working?
It's not working.
It's not
Two-
working.
Okay.
Two specific points. The little subdivision that went up on the top of the East Mountain, and then Jay's subdivision Jay's is, I mean, he did a great job. Sewer, water, paved streets and everything, but he didn't put any sidewalks in. The city didn't make him do it.
it wasn't required in the subdivision ordinance.
I thought it was.
Well, I mean, the city, you out there, and we went out there on behalf of the planning, and you went out there on behalf of the city when we approved the subdivision, and the planning commission approved it, and the city both approved the subdivision, and nobody's thinking about putting sidewalks in there as a condition of getting the subdivision approved.
Well,
Which was a mistake.
Yeah, I guess we overlooked it, didn't we?
I mean, is there a requirement to be a street in a subdivision?
Well, I think that's something, if you want sidewalks, that should be part of it.
Well,
Yeah.
but we have a subdivision
Especially-
ordinance. I mean, does the ordinance we have now require sidewalks or not? I didn't think it did.
I don't think it does either.
Well,
So,
I mean, whatever change, if there are any changes, number one, there may be changes that are needed
There.
for that
There you go.
example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And within the existing ordinance, there may be changes that are needed or,
Well,
A
to me
group
right now,
decides
it's a
could be done.
catch-22.
right.
The ordinance says it's property owners,
Right.
and we're not making the property owners do it. We can't get grants, or the city can't fix it because it belongs to the individual property owners. So it's,
But
Okay.
the subdivisions, we can make the owners do it.
Right,
Yeah.
we
But-
can do that. We could certainly make that change
But it's the
immediately.
way it needs to be, and they've either got to have an HOA,
could you push your mic over there so he can talk into it? Thank you.
they got to have an HOA to, to keep those up, or they put them into a spec provided by the city, and then the city maintains it. You can do it either way.
I'm not sure how that street out there, do you remember how that street is? Does the city take over the street or Jay maintain it?
Well, I mean,
I'm
I
sure
think
the
at this
city-
point, you just update your ordinance
Well-
to make sure you had that covered,
Because I didn't want to say something.
right?
I just wanted to bring up two things. One, the subdivision regulations. Planning Commission is authorized to require the subdivisor to furnish and pay for public sidewalks, public curbing along the sides of the streets, and/or public guttering along the sides of any street. The second thing I was going to bring up is I've gone to several clerks workshops this year, a couple of them on scholarships. Two of them mentioned ADA and sidewalks. There has been issues with cities that are, especially cities with historic districts. North Little Rock is one that I'm thinking of that they use an example. And then West Memphis as well, where the cities took over responsibility and now they're having to remove those sidewalks because they're not ADA compliant and they don't have any way to replace those sidewalks because there's no feasible way to make those compliant.
Okay, so you're saying because the city now is responsible for those sidewalks as a whole, they now are under the stipulation of ADA requirements?
I'd have to check with the municipal league on that, but I believe that is true if you're replacing or repairing those. I also know that there are organizations out there that will do studies before we mess with the ordinance and make something irreversible. Maybe we should hire a company, one of those companies that does studies of here's the feasibility of repairing these sidewalks. Here's the feasibility of putting sidewalks here. They have those resources, and the municipal league also has grants resources. Karen Curry, I spoke with her about it. She didn't seem to think there were very many options, but she was open to exhausting them. So there's that option as well. But I think just a comprehensive study would really assist. That's just based on what I learned at my clerk's workshop. That is obviously up to you guys.
That's a good point.
There's just a lot of moving parts. And I mean, you know, nobody said this was going to be an easy discussion or a quick fix at all.
David?
Susan, just a question. Is this thing on? Can you hear me?
Look at your button and see if it's working.
Just a question regarding your plan and looking at some of the pictures of like severely disturbed sidewalks. Has there been a study or a plan to attack the worst of the worst and then move forward from that point instead of attacking it all at the same time?
If I remember correctly, I apologize if I'm saying something that's not true, but you've worked with past building inspector and previous on a plan to repair. I mean, obviously, I would assume that you're trying to get the worst of them taken care of.
The answer is yes.
Okay.
Bobby Ray had established a list of sidewalks with priorities that needed to be repaired as soon as possible, if not immediately. We've attacked some of those. A lot of them had to do with when buildings were being remodeled, he required them to fix the sidewalks at that time, which I think is somewhere in through here too that Susan has listed. I'm talking with our present building inspector we tried to find that list, and unfortunately, during the process of changing inspectors, that list got lost. So Jordan is coming back up.
Yeah.
Not Jordan.
Because I mean, like
Jacob.
a lot of the pictures I'm looking at, Susan, that you provided or whoever provided
Tom
them,
did, the colored ones, yeah,
Yeah.
that was Tom.
These are things that could be fixed with just making the tree pit larger and not having to pour additional concrete. You just take the concrete out and make the tree pit bigger.
Just lift up that slab.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. And I actually got some pictures from a neighbor today, and she asked the very same thing. So when we're talking about repairing sidewalks, some of them will be quick fixes, and some of them will be major fixes. I mean, you know, you talk about what Fergie was talking about downtown, the areas that are just kind of the sidewalks that are suspended over, you know, that below those buildings. You know, that's a major fix, but some of these are easy fixes or easier fixes.
And some of them too, on Main Street, when we were pouring the new sidewalk, we intentionally went around some trees and poles. It makes the sidewalk smaller at that point. But again, that was something we were able to do. So, yeah.
I know Jacob, during your meeting, I think, had some input on this process.
He did. Jacob, do you want to come up? Or was this your proposed ordinance here?
No, that was an ordinance that planning presented to city council some time back.
Oh, okay.
And
Okay, gotcha.
I was trying to figure a way where we could have the sidewalks fixed without spending a lot of money a lot of city money. At that time, there was a language here saying that if somebody was doing repair work in a commercial building in the historical district, the building inspector would require them to fix the sidewalks if they needed to as part of that process. At that time, the city attorney said, there's language in here about new construction, and he said new construction, we couldn't mandate that. And rather than vote on the other proposed ordinance, the city council just ignored the whole thing and didn't voted it down. So that was one thing I was trying to do, to try to get repairs made that wouldn't cost the city any money. But like I say, based on what the city attorney said about the new construction, rather than taking that out and pass the other part of it, city council rejected the whole thing. So that's where that came from.
Jacob?
When was this ordinance?
That was presented to city council sometime back when Tim Weaver was still the city attorney.
Tim's been city attorney for 20, 30 years, so.
So
remember that.
before I issue a certificate of occupancy, I require the sidewalk to be repaired. So it's usually a certificate of occupancy, a pass with the conditions that they repair the sidewalk in a timely manner that we discuss. So that's a stipulation that I require.
Okay, is that in code?
No, ma'am, not in our current code.
Okay, so
It is in a property maintenance code.
it is in the what?
Property maintenance code, international property maintenance.
Okay. So I guess we'd need to make sure that that's clearly stated somewhere in our ordinance?
It's adopted by adopting city ordinances and city, the International
Yeah,
Building Code.
we did that, the council, I believe, did that just a year and a half ago or so,
Yeah.
by adopting the International Buildings Standard.
Can you get me a copy of that section? I'd like to read
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, absolutely.
My concern with the occupancy is that implies a new business. And a lot of times these businesses they're years in business, they're not getting any updates, they're not doing any remodels, and they're certainly not calling you out to look at their sidewalk. And I think a lot of times that's where these exact problems are happening. It's not the ones that are having that constant turnover of, new occupancy and new businesses and things like that. I'm concerned with these old timers that have this property for 20, 30 years.
Yeah,
and
deferred maintenance is definitely the issue.
Deferred maintenance.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
So if the property is rented and it's a business downtown, are you issuing a certificate of occupancy on a new, if there's something, and it could be anywhere in town. I'm just saying if it's a commercial business, are we talking about commercial, right? Commercial and residential. So if it's a commercial business and that building is rented from someone who owns that building, are you doing a certificate of occupancy on those particular buildings?
Yes,
Is
ma'am,
there-
with the condition that if there's a repair that needs to be done with the sidewalk, I put that in as a condition to the
So
property.
that's for the
property
owner?
To the owner, not the
I
person
got you.
who's leasing.
Okay,
them.
all right.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to clarify.
But that doesn't, so if someone clears out of a store and they re-rent that store to somebody else,
I'm sorry, sir.
if they rent that store to somebody else, you don't do a certificate of occupancy
Yes.
then, do you?
Yes,
Oh, you do?
Yes, sir.
Every new person opens a business downtown?
Yes, sir.
and
Every
rents
new
a spot?
business occupancy.
yes, sir.
They're
Okay.
required that before they obtain their business license. Any change of ownership, tenant,
Good.
I know
Yeah.
the house I restored, it turned into a rental property. I had to do a certificate for that house. So
Yes,
that
sir.
that was an old property. that
Okay.
restored. So a little bit of help there.
Yes, sir.
So, Jacob, can I, so you've been here, got some time under your belt. How do you feel the condition of the sidewalks are? Sorry.
I mean, the deferred maintenance is definitely, it's proven. It's Spring Street, I believe, in front of all the commercial buildings is, in my opinion, the most severe spot. You have limestone that's very slippery, wet. You have unstable, uneven, walking surfaces. Because of the culvert, you have a 15, 20-foot drop. 1-inch crack in the sidewalk is typically not a repairable. Typically, they say you replace that portion of the sidewalk. And there's portions of Spring Street that has 4-inch cracks on the underside of it that run down the...
That are raised up 4 inches?
That are underneath the sidewalk, that are 4 inches wide, that run a good distance.
Oh, okay, I got you.
And 1 inch is typically the cutoff where you replace it, so there's 4 inches. So there's some severe issues on Spring Street.
So how, I mean, give us some help here. What was the best, what do you think is a good plan to kind of be able to eat this elephant one bite at a time?
I think grants, the historic preservation grants, I think is where we should look at. I think we should have a full-time grant writer, somebody who's just focused on strictly finding funding for this, and I think we should tackle it one section at a time. It's going to be expensive regardless. The logistics is going to be difficult, but if we just continue down the path that we're on right now, it's just going to keep getting progressively worse.
Well, I know you said at our meeting, you said doing nothing is not a plan,
Yes, ma'am.
which is what, I mean, it's not a plan.
Right.
So
We have to start somewhere.
we have to start somewhere, so.
So what do you think of Ida's idea of hiring a company to do a study? Is that something useful, do you think, or?
Having an outside consultant for sure who specializes in it is always a good idea. I'm the first one to say, look, I would definitely recommend that. But just so you guys know, any alteration, repair to a sidewalk is going to trigger ADA accessibility. So that's just something that we just got to plan on and just, address. I've spoke to Dennis Freed, the State Fire Marshal, today, and he confirmed that as well, too.
I know we all see dollar signs pop up when that happens, but that's actually what we should be shooting for, too, is everybody have that accessibility.
Yes, and if we don't, we should be at least having signage on our sidewalks that identify that it is not ADA accessible for the people who are trying to navigate these sidewalks.
If I remember, we had a map, or was there a mapping done or kind of a consensus done on, okay, Owen Street is never going to be wheelchair accessible because it's so steep? Or was there anything like that put together for the city?
Not that I know of.
Not that you know of. Okay. Okay.
I really do like that cautionary indication. That would be great, because that's one of the things that, as I'm traveling through town, I'm talking to people, I see a lot more wheelchairs and walkers. And I saw a lady literally get her walker stuck in one of those cracks we're talking about, and she couldn't get it out. And then finally a young man showed up that could lift up the sidewalk to get it uncracked. And a sign saying, caution, this is a step in the right direction. So I think, I know that way back, I was part of the parks when we did the warning about the springs. And I think that was a good positive step. We haven't been able to fix that yet, but the city's working on the sewer systems now. So, it takes a long time. But I think, and part of that, like we said, this is going to take a long process. It's going to take a long time. I think the initial thing the city should do is put up markers, signs saying, warning, this is not ADA compliant, at this time, or work, something that says, okay, be careful.
Jacob, I have a question about ADA sidewalks. So I'm assuming they have to be a certain width, and they have to be created with a certain material, smooth or whatever. So of the materials that are mentioned in our ordinance, would all of those be considered ADA compliant?
Definitely not regular limestone.
So of
Natural limestone.
within our current ordinance, what materials would not be considered ADA compliant? Because it's in here.
Limestone is a very slippery surface, and then even in our ordinance, it states that once they repair the limestone, they need to repolish it, which is, in my opinion, a very bad idea when you have a steep grade. and you have a wet condition, polished limestone on a steep grade is something you want to avoid at all costs. I think that's something we should take immediately out of our ordinance.
Okay, what about stamped? Because stamped was one,
Yes,
limestone
ma'am.
is
You can
one,
have
and,
you can have artificial limestone too, that's not as porous, it's not as slippery as natural
oh,
limestone.
there is an artificial limestone?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh,
What about liquid limestone? Have you heard about that?
No, that sounds,
I was
Doing some research.
What is it?
liquid
liquid
limestone?
limestone. It's basically ground down and made into a concrete.
Oh, is it,
Material.
well, and that's limestone's
durable?
typically.
Are you talking about stamped concrete?
No, it's literally liquid limestone. I think it's pretty much
Limestone.
ground down into a fine powder.
You like walking through a puddle?
Well, it dries,
Limestone
hopefully.
and limestone is used to make concrete.
At one time, our sidewalk ordinance, when regarding the limestone, required them to have a brushed or a hammered surface on there to keep it from that.
It had to be grooved, I think.
And grooved and hammered. But also, you know, we are dealing, again, and it goes back to your historic district and historic materials. Susan, when you ask about what materials are not ADA compliant, think back about Georgetown, D.C., or other places in Colorado that have cobblestones. You know, and again, those aren't
Right.
they're not wheelchair friendly or baby stroller friendly.
I'm just
And
asking.
they're slippery.
Yeah, and I'm asking him so that
I'm
if that
just-
is something that needs to be updated in our ordinance,
But when you're dealing with historic structures and historic material, that adds another element into it.
true, but if there was a sidewalk that needed to be repaired, and somebody looked at our court ordinance right now, and they were going to replace a 10-foot section, and in here it says limestone, it says stamped concrete, and it says aggregate concrete. I'm asking him which one is ADA compliant, because there's no point in having something in here that's not ADA compliant, not in our ordinance. I mean, if we're going to say we're moving forward.
I understand.
Yeah.
I don't think there is a list in the code or anywhere else that says this material is not ADA compliant.
You typically want a concrete that has some aggregate, you want some grip.
So there's texture.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Having a very slippery, wet surface is not a good combination for people
then
who
is-
are ADA or non-ADA.
Is an ADA sidewalk different from a regular sidewalk by International Business Code as far as width or?
So there are entryways to the sidewalks that are required, and there is a minimum height too that is required on them.
Cut-ins.
Right, but if it's just a sidewalk, if we're looking at just the main part of the sidewalk, is there anything different besides what somebody would normally put in?
Yes, you would
Okay.
have width, yes ma'am, you'd have height, width,
Okay,
Grade.
grade, absolutely.
okay. And none of that's in
In some
here?
cases, hand railings too as well.
Concrete is from Roman days. You know, concrete has been around since they built the aqueducts and those streets. And so, concrete itself and a brushed concrete is usually what they do for sidewalks.
Absolutely.
A broom finish gives it enough break to make it, non-slick until it gets coated with ice, but that's anything, there's
Right.
nothing you can do to prevent that. So, I'm a believer in poured concrete. I mean, it's tried and true.
And I've talked to a lot of property owners on Spring Street that would be for removing the limestone and installing just standard concrete, repairing it and just putting concrete instead of limestone.
Our guidelines, ADA, we all have a copy in pamphlet, or the package you're handed out to. It doesn't say we can never get rid of limestone. And I think,
I've heard
and
that
I
a
was on
lot.
HDC for 8 years, and I'm always been an advocate to maintain our historical integrity here in town. It's one thing that attracts people here. But safety comes first.
Sure.
And I think what our guidelines basically says, if you can repair the limestone and fix it and make it work, make it work. But if you can't, then other materials need to be used. It also states that limestone does have a shelf life. It doesn't last forever. It starts cracking, it starts breaking. So the idea of keeping it forever is really unrealistic.
Yes, sir. It really just depends on maintenance. Everything depends on maintenance, really. It's true.
Also, in this discussion, I don't want to forget about the neighborhoods. I'm afraid we're going to really focus in on the most used walk part of downtown, where the tourists go. But also, our neighborhood's been screaming for years for accessible, walkable sidewalks.
And a lot of that, and I'm glad you brought that up, a lot of that has to do with drainage, water drainage, soil erosion that's affecting the concrete, the trees, the root systems that are affecting the sidewalks as well. There's a lot of variables that go into that, but a lot of it has to do with drainage and soil erosion that's creating the unleveling and instability of these sidewalks in the neighborhoods, the chipping and, those types of things. So.
As a retired person here in town, I love to be able to walk out of my house, get on the sidewalk and walk around. But until I get to a certain part of the road, I am just watching traffic coming and going to make sure I don't get run over to get up to that part.
Yeah.
And I live in town.
Yes, sir.
And
You definitely don't want tripping hazards on a sidewalk near vehicle traffic. That's not a good combination.
So anything else you recommend, or?
I honestly think a grant approach is the best way. I made a good point about having an assessment. I think to assess where we should begin is key if we do get a grant, and just piece by piece, section by section, and we just work our way through, because the logistics of it's going to be difficult to navigate. But I think once we start making that momentum, I think it's going to get easier and people are just going to be more tolerant. I mean, we have a small city. It's not that big of a city. It'd be accomplished. I believe so.
Terry?
So.
I think one of us as city council persons should at the next meeting, or have the mayor go ahead and put this on the agenda. And I think the idea that I'd have had about, having a study done, I think that's a very good idea. I think that we should discuss it and maybe, approve on the front end, just approve of somebody seeing what's out there that can be done, what the cost would be, and then bring it back for us to approve
So I've actually
or disapprove that study.
I've actually met with 3 contractors, maybe about 2 weeks ago, 3 separate contractors, foundation repair and sidewalk repair contractors. So they all came out, individually gave me quotes. We walked the neighborhood, so I can have one of them, 2 of them, or all of them come in.
No, I'm wanting an overview of the town as well. That's more than just what the cost of, construction. That's one facet of it, but
Right.
I think what you're talking about is a more overall general picture.
They drove through and identified serious areas and most problematic areas, and that's where they came up with their bid, was to where they would start.
We'll look at what they have.
If you want me to ask them to come in, I don't have no problem doing it.
I know.
Jacob, I remember, or you had mentioned something about once we start working on a sidewalk, let's say downtown, and we already know how narrow parts of those are, does ADA state that if you're going to fix that sidewalk, it has to be ADA compliant, or is there a feasibility factor in there?
There's a feasibility factor, 100%. Yes, sir. So typically ADA, repair, alteration, or change of a sidewalk will trigger ADA compliance, but there always is a feasibility in a historic district. If it's just not feasible to do so, you're going to get that grandfathered in. So it's not practical to do it everywhere because of these old buildings, but
Okay, and my second question, and I'm ignorant when it comes to construction materials and whatnot, but have we looked at like bricks instead of concrete, instead of limestone, instead of whatever? Because those are much more easily repairable if a tree root pops a brick up.
labor-wise, it'd be more costly to install the bricks. It'd be
But is the product cheaper itself?
the concrete would actually be less expensive
Okay.
to use the concrete. Yes, sir.
Concrete's about the cheapest.
And also probably slick
They get warm.
health-wise, because once those brick get wet and you tend to get moss and
Okay.
stuff going on too.
Like I said, I was ignorant.
'Cause it's an organic material.
I
And
wish
you
we
could
could
pour,
just,
and you could pour the concrete and stamp it and make it look just like limestone, honestly.
I often thought it would be wonderful if we could, I know you're not allowed to have any more of the boardwalks, but that Trex decking stuff, if you just cover up what's there, put a frame, and then all you do is pop those boards out when they get back. I mean, but,
It really has to be tackled from underneath the
yeah, no,
sidewalk.
I know.
So if it's a tree root, do you remove the slab, cut the root, and then replace the slab?
Kill the tree.
That's.
You could, I mean, there's multiple things you could do. If the tree's still alive, you could shave the
Permanent.
root. Me and Tom talked about this, you can remove the actual sidewalk, shave the roots down to make it level, reinstall that, and hopefully the tree will recover. If the tree's dead, best recommendation would be removal of that tree and the stump and the roots.
So can the majority of these popped up slabs be fixed by just creating or enlarging the tree pit area?
That's a tough one because depending on the location of it, and there's a lot of variables in that.
I mean, we have to face the fact that there are very few areas in this town that are ADA acceptable or accessible, and that can be. We can try to work towards it, but if you're walking along Spring Street on the sidewalk and there's a slab 2 inches up and it's because of a tree root, just increase the size of the tree bed instead of having to replace a whole section, because it's just going to happen again.
Right. That's an option. It is.
Hopefully, we work with an arborist to give you, information, advice about each individual's.
Because every
Job.
tree is going to be different for sure,
Some big trees, you can probably take a big root out and be okay, and some of them
Right.
might kill them, so.
Yes, sir.
And just so I'm clear on ADA compliancy, if you do nothing with the sidewalk and leave it as is, are you saying that until you fix it, that's when the ADA kicks in?
Yes, ma'am. Once
Okay,
you
all right.
start that
I
alteration
got
and
you.
repair,
Okay.
that's when you trigger.
Just wanna make
That's
sure.
also true if an
Within-
individual
within
owns their
public
sidewalk.
property.
That may not be true.
What's that?
Pardon?
On
That's-
public property.
Right.
On public property?
Yeah.
Not private, so
But
that
not
a
private.
private person says, I'm gonna repair my sidewalk, they don't have to bring it up to ADA.
It's up to
compliance.
the property owner to make that.
Okay, so let me ask you this then, if with that thought in mind, is that something, I had a conversation with Tom when we were on our walk. There are buildings on Main Street that nobody's been in for several years. Same thing with sidewalks.
It's still public property, private property.
But if it's private property, could an ordinance be written that says that if you replace your sidewalk or repair your sidewalk, it has to be ADA compliant? I mean, the city could,
You're making a broad statement in a city that has a hard time complying with ADA.
If a building sits longer than 5
Specifications.
years, it has to be brought up to code. If it's building is sitting vacant.
if it's empty?
Vacant and unoccupied for 5 years, that building needs to be brought up to code.
Well, thank you for telling me that, though, because I know we saw some yesterday, kind of that have been sitting for a long time with no one in them. So, but what I was just basically asking is, could you update a city ordinance that said any new sidewalk, even if it's on private property, has to be brought up to ADA standards? I mean, you're already giving the ownership of the sidewalk. The ownership is already with the private property owner now, and you've said you can only use limestone concrete and stamped concrete. So why could you not say it has to be ADA
I'm
compliant
surprised
if you
it
replace
doesn't.
it?
I'm surprised it doesn't. If I restore a building, I have to bring it up to ADA compliance if it's a public building.
Yes, sir.
And all sidewalks, if they're on the street, they're public sidewalks. So
Yes, sir.
I'm not sure why it would be brought up to ADA compliance.
That was the directive I got from the state fire marshal today. He confirmed that.
So it sounds like we have some options, but it also sounds like maybe our ordinances need to be reviewed. Just you know, because none of this is going to happen overnight.
Well, I don't believe we should pull a gun on making any decision until a study or something's done, and then go from there. So I think what Terry said, to bring it to our city council and ask that we look at hiring someone to do a study, feasibility study, before we make any decisions at all.
Have we tried the historic preservation funds? Have we tried that for
What was
grants?
the question?
The historic preservation funds, have we tried that for grants yet?
I would have to ask Glenn.
There's, I was just reading, there's like 5 grants that are available for historic communities for infrastructure.
Like 20, 30 million?
5 to 8 to 20 million, yes, sir.
Are those for private individuals or cities?
Cities, municipalities,
I haven't found any on.
historic preservation fund, yeah. I'll send it to you right now.
And one of the other things I know Jackie had sent over, and I think you all probably received this email, was what Denver did on an ordinance that they actually voted. Terry, did you see this? Yeah?
I can't remember.
It's the ordinance that they passed. It's ordinance 307 in Denver. And basically, it says that sidewalks used to be the homeowner's responsibility, and now it's been taken over basically by the city. But they have enacted an ordinance that comes with a annual fee
Yeah.
for homeowners, so that they're
It's like an
contributing to
HOA
that
they're
pool.
setting up
Yeah, to that repair pool.
citywide.
So,
Made up a bond issue.
And I think that's a great idea.
so I mean, that's an option too, but it
That'd
would
have to be to the public to be voted on.
voted, yeah, they did.
Yeah.
They voted, so, but I mean, you know, I
That's an
think,
option.
I think it's a good start
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
do a study.
That's an avenue that I think is plausible.
Where there's an area with a lot of foot traffic, there should be some maintenance, you know. for-
And I think theirs is maybe a couple $100 or something per year, but, you know, I mean, it helps,
Yeah.
you know. I mean, we're all paying taxes anyway, so, you know, that tax money should be going somewhere, but
I'd rather
this
it
was
went
their
locally,
solution.
so-
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
so.
Okay. I'd like, anybody else out there in the audience that want to make a comment or suggestion?
If you
or
want, you can
idea
come up
or-
to the mic.
That'd be good.
And typically you get about 3 to 5 minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll take that one. My name's Carl Arquizu.
Just
We
talk
own-
into the microphone.
We own the 226 Spring Street house that we're refurbishing, also on Elk Street, 18 Elk Street. Your ordinance 9.08.02 defines what we've just been talking about. It's up to the owner to be ADA compliant. My observation was that it was one municipality that took over the sidewalks and they got stuck with the ADA thing. They couldn't make it compliant. What happens to a homeowner? So what I'm hearing is, we don't want to use tax money, so let's just put it on the homeowner. That's what I'm hearing. That might be a wrong assessment. You know, we've had the pleasure of working with Jacob, and we found that respect, collaboration, and common sense generally solves most problems. So I know we can say tree pits. Maybe that's an 80% solution. In front of our house, that would not work. You'd have no sidewalk. We have beautiful limestone slabs that I like to preserve and put those back. So saying it has to be concrete, well, another expense to us. And then we have the other tentacle of the historic committee. Do they have a say that said, no, that's not going to work because this is a historically significant house on Spring Street. You can't do that. So that's some of our frustrations and observation. But we've had the pleasure of working with the city inspector. And like I said, respect, collaboration, and common sense. I know the city can solve this along with the homeowners. We just have to make a decision to do it. So we can talk about what might not work, what didn't work in the past. I'd say just forget about that. Let's start from ground zero. Bring in some of the homeowners, especially the ones that have problems with this. We can solve this. You know, if you're saying it's going to be to the benefit of the tourism in the city, well, it's not benefiting me. it's costing me money. So that's what I'm saying. There has to be some intersection of interest here, and we can solve this. But, you know, I'm saying, hey, talk about it as much as you can, bring us in, but I'm all for, you know, joining in, leaning in, and seeing what we can do to solve this. So that's just my, 2.5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I just want to say thank you. I mean, I've been working on this for a year, just taking you out one by one to walk the sidewalks so that you could experience them. And I think the thing I want you to remember when you sit at the city council table is that it isn't about the state of the sidewalks or the repair. It's about what you want in the future and who you want to be as a community in the future. And who you want to be is you want to be ADA compliant, and you want to be accessible, and you want to attract people who want to walk, and you want it to be in a way for older people and younger people to experience the entire community. I know that I'm solely focused on the downtown, so that's where I take you to walk, but I want sidewalks in every neighborhood. That's what I want to see. I think the entire community wants that. And so there isn't a quick fix. I think having a study done, there is not a study done in the city on what your sidewalks are today. And you need that. And you need an outside voice to come in and look at your ordinances and also bring in what's happening around the country. Don't seem small. Think big here. Because even though you don't have the money today, because you don't have the money today, you will have the money. It will happen. I mean, right? You're not going to just let them deteriorate completely. So think forward. Think about, what do I want to see in 30 years? You know, Butch won't be mayor in 30 years. Well, he might be. I don't know. Right? I just want you to empower yourself with the idea that everything is possible. Don't set yourself small. I think what happens in our community is we think small. We think, oh, it's just too big of a project and it's too much money. It's going to be $50 million and we just can't do it. And that is not the way to think about this. The way to think about this is one sidewalk at a time, one piece at a time. And with every sidewalk and every piece you do, that's a win. And you celebrate that win because that connectivity is going to make a difference for the entire future. So any resource I can bring, I'm happy, Ida, to also provide some folks who do that kind of assessment so you can have some ideas as how much that would cost. But I think that's the very first start. I also think continually talking about it with the community is a really progressive way of thinking. We're not hiding under a bushel and pretending it's not happening. We want to hear what you have to say. We want to know what your experience is. We want to know what obstacles you have. I have been, of course, very interested in what Denver has done and have shared that with multiple people throughout the community. And what I have heard is, oh, even if it wouldn't benefit my neighborhood, I'd pay that. I'd pay that so downtown would be walkable. I mean, that's the feeling that people have. Like, oh, I'd pay that fee because I want that to be right for somebody else. It's not always just what's right for me. So just hang in there. You're doing the right thing. I'm so incredibly proud of you. I mean, honestly, having these kind of workshops, and if we can be a resource, let me know. And there are grants. There's very small grants from AARP. They give grants for walkable communities every year. We can apply for them if our organization can apply. They're not a lot of money, but they could take a bite of the elephant. And there are some other, I'm looking at, Butch, the federal government, although we didn't get some of those transportation grants, I suspect that those are going to continue to come back. It's just reapplying, right? It's being focused and just reapplying. And I think one of the things to think about, and I think we often will write a grant, not my organization, but the community, saying that it's going to attract tourism. And I understand that that's our industry, but that isn't the grant language that people want now. They want to know that it's good for your community. It's about walkability for your community and the people who live here. So be thinking about that. Yes, it is our industry, tourism, but that isn't who the grantors want you to write grants for. They want you to write grants for you. So think about that. Our walkability score is about 47 out of 100. It's not great. So every step we can do to make that better is worth it. And hopefully you'll walk with me next year too, and we can keep talking about it, But good job. I think this is a good first step.
Send me that link on AARP. Is
On
that for
AARP?
individuals? Is that for individuals or for government?
It's for communities.
It's for communities.
Communities, nonprofits, or government?
Government. So I will send you that. They've given in the years that they've done it, I think they've given a total of $10 million. So they're small grants, but again, I was telling the folks yesterday, when we replaced the library sidewalk, that was $8,000. So in front of the library.
But that went to a specific nonprofit.
Yes. Yes, right.
But again, that comes back to the individuals.
Sure.
As opposed to the city, because the city got an $8,000 grant for sidewalks.
Right. But if there are opportunities, there are ways to use the Main Street organization to write that grant through so that we could then do that sidewalk for that individual property owner if we don't take this step.
But there's nothing to stop you from doing that now.
No, there's nothing to stop us from doing that now. I just can't do sidewalks all the time. But you are right. You're right.
Or the individual.
Yes.
The individual can write the grant and run it through the Main Street.
Yeah, well, they probably can't write the grant, but
Or get a grant writer or whatever.
Yeah. I just think, I think it will be like that. It's a jigsaw puzzle of all the pieces, right? And you'll just have to think that through. But yeah, I will send you that. I'll send you the ARP. There's another one that's kind of small, but I'll send you that as well.
There's more power as a community than there is individually.
Yes.
I think that's what we're trying to accomplish.
And also just to think about, so streets are owned by the city, right? So we care, what that says, the message that says is we care about drivers. We care about drivers because we care about the streets, the city, the city. But the sidewalks.
It's debatable to some people.
Huh? But the sidewalks. Good luck. We don't have the same care. Good luck to you. And that isn't a great feeling either. So be thinking about that as well. We would like to have everybody feel that the way that they're commuting or the way that they're experiencing the community is part of the city's plan. So, Yep. Well, and thank you, really. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Sir?
Name is Mark Anderson. I live here in town, in the historic district. I'm an engineer. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not a salesman. So I'll speak pretty plainly. I put down over 100 feet of sidewalk a couple months ago. It was expensive, but some was crumbled and some just never existed. So it was important to my wife and I to finish the property. We do have a sidewalk problem. It's big, it's messy. There's so many issues. I mean, we've got trees coming up through sidewalks. We've got telephone poles right in the middle of the sidewalks, depending where you look. That's a problem if you're in a wheelchair or a walker. I walked here today. I came down Howell Street. Have you ever walked down Howell Street when it's wet? We got a lot of things. And this problem gets, or this question or issue gets so complicated. I think the city would benefit by taking, kind of an organized approach to it that was kind of like an engineering problem where you start out with what are your boundary conditions. If you go to a business school and do case studies, what are the case facts? What do we know? And first by assembling what we know. And there's a lot of brain power right here. Might be enough to sort through it and say, yep, we got a good plan. Perhaps not. sometimes, this is the first time that we're really dealing with a problem this big, I think, or at least about sidewalks this big, and want to get completion. And if we're doing that, perhaps an outside service that could organize our thinking and get the stakeholders involved, prioritize what's most important in a way that it's difficult for me to do, because I live here, or perhaps for you to do. In business, there were times we'd hire consultants to solve problems that were different than what our daily life deals with. I worked at Hewlett Packard, and we built printers, and we had a problem with printers stopping when they weren't supposed to, and customers really hated that. We hired a professor from MIT who came out and was able to fix everything for us in like half a day. So sometimes there are people out there that can have the experience or different skills than each of you need in your jobs that can apply to this and help make it work. So, personal opinion, everybody's got one, I know that. But I think you're all intent on making Eureka Springs better, and I really respect that. That's great. But this is a big problem, and I really think it's got to be broken into pieces and dealt with piece by piece. Don't try and solve it all at once. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark.
Does,
So-
Mike's back there just to watch?
Way back there.
Pardon me?
Oh, no.
I'll jump right behind you.
His name's saying.
There we go.
Hey, I'm Michael Akins, and I live in Eureka. So two things that I just wanted to kind of point out. One is Jacob had talked about the certificates of occupancies. He's not giving a certificate of occupancy unless they fix the sidewalk out front. I've lived here for 2 years. A lot of businesses have gone in and out on Spring Street, on Main Street, all up through there. I hadn't seen one sidewalk fixed. So let's find out from our building inspector how many certificates of occupancies he's not giving because of sidewalks. If it's part of our regulations that they have to fix the sidewalks, why are we going ahead and giving them their certificate of occupancy if they haven't fixed the sidewalk? The second thing is when we were in Municipal League in January, I attended a conference on ADA. And one of the things that they talked about on the ADA was that we have to make a reasonable accommodation. It doesn't mean that we can always meet exactly what we need for ADA. It just means that we have to make a reasonable accommodation. So if our terrain or whatever, we can't actually meet the width or the height, we just have to make the reasonable effort to make it right. So that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Anybody else? Anything you want to add?
Okay, so next steps? What is the plan? Sounds like,
It'll be on the council agenda since one of the the council members requested that. Only one council member needs to request for an agenda item to be added, so that'll be on there.
do you know what date the next meeting is?
It will be the second Monday, which is the
11th.
11th.
12/11?
And we've only got the one next week.
And then I will get in touch with Jackie, and I will also get in touch with West Memphis because I know they had a study done, and North Little Rock, I think, may have been looking into a study, so I can take a look. I know there's some where they will take a specific area that you want to focus on, and that's going to be more cost effective because they do it for it's like a one-time free type of freebie. At least that's what the West Memphis clerk told me. So I'll have to see if we qualify.
So I just have a question real quick. One of the items that I had mentioned in here was creating zones and creating neighborhood sidewalk groups. Do y'all think that's beneficial? Because there's a lot of information to put
Could be.
together.
I think that it could be.
Yeah, I think it's past, after we get the study, then we'll know more, we can see farther.
Okay,
And
so
then we
do you
can figure
think
out that.
do you think the neighborhoods could assist with the study?
I
I'm
think-
just saying there's a lot of information out there.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
Just as a suggestion,
Yeah.
just saying,
Yeah.
you know, that might be a help to those individuals who could possibly or may possibly be doing a study.
I think whoever
Might
we
be
hire to
helpful.
do the study will tell us what they need.
That'd be something that council would
I
discuss.
would think that the engineering company or whoever do the study would
Know what they
would
need.
help, and also put into priorities. I know, one of the things, I would like to see is, and we've talked about sidewalks on East Mountain, we've talked about sidewalks on Pivot Rock. Where do we need new sidewalks?
Right.
Well, we're talking about repairing old ones, but where do we need new ones? We got TAP grants that we're being applying for the highways, but that's a separate issue,
Does all of 62, all of 62 does not qualify for TAP grants, right?
No, it's all to school, it's all TAP grants eligible highway.
How far from schools? Is there a certain distance from schools
I
that,
don't think so.
no?
You know, that is my biggest fear, is up on the highway.
Yeah.
And
And I think,
pedestrians all the time, I watch for them more than I do for the cars coming in. When it gets to be dusk.
right.
I mean,
Well,
it's-
and we
it's
walked
fearful.
Hillside. It was
Right.
horrible.
Right. And the roundabout's coming, and I guess February is still the start date, I guess, or next year, 2024 for the
Yeah, I'm
roundabout?
not sure on the date. But,
Okay.
the sidewalks eventually will go to the school.
Right, and that's what part of that whole plan, in my opinion, is to get
And
them out
then
there.
that's also goes from 62 to the school.
Right.
So-
And
Can
the
you get it,
roundabout
can
had
you
a-
get it for that section that didn't get done?
The roundabout
The
has
mystery zone.
sidewalks built into the plan, too. I know they had a pedestrian tunnel, I
Right.
think, yeah.
Yep.
But
That's
I'll
amazing.
also talk to McClellan and see what it would cost their estimate on doing the study.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Anybody else
I mean-
have anything, or we, I think we're done?
Thank you for having the discussion, and thank you
Thanks
for
for who
adding
showed up.
input, for sure. So, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think it's a couple of local